Alright, what's going on everyone? In this video I'm going to show you how to upgrade the Oko the Trickster Planeswalker deck on a budget. As always, do keep in mind that this is not intended to be a tier 1 competitive deck. If you want that, consider checking out the latest tournament results. What we'll be doing is upgrading this deck card by card, sticking to this deck's themes and doing it on a budget, as we will not exceed the retail price of the deck with our upgrades. So the Oko the Trickster Planeswalker deck doesn't actually have a core theme or strategy, but rather multiple small overlapping ones. There is a bit of a non-human theme, as you can see with things like Wildborn Preserver, Mistford, River Turtle, and Keeper of Fables. All of these have benefits for playing a lot of non-humans. The Fox can generate counters, the Turtle makes one unblockable when it attacks, and the Keeper helps us draw cards when non-humans deal combat damage to the opponent. Although despite that, there are still humans floating around in the deck, which is kind of weird. Doesn't make a whole lot of sense. They basically have no synergy at all and don't really belong in the deck at all. And then there is sort of a card drawing theme, as you can see with Fairy Vandal, although we don't really have a lot of card draw in the deck. In fact, only 2 cards in the entire deck let us draw that extra card per turn, those being Keeper of Fables and Tomb Raider, and the Fairy is just an abysmal card, not great. It's strictly worse than Cloudkin Seer, which I actually cut out of another Planeswalker deck, so that shows you the power level of that card. Plus there are only 2 actual Fairy Vandals, so I don't even know if this should count as a sub-theme. There's this weird Vandal that cares about drawing cards, and a couple draw outlets, but not a whole lot. But yeah, that's basically the idea, is the Fairy Vandal wants us to draw more cards, Keeper of Fable lets us draw extra cards, and the Turtle helps non-humans deal damage, so we can draw the extra card from Keeper of Fable. So you can kind of see this string of sort of synergy, but it's janky synergy because all of these cards kind of suck if they don't have, lots of support. And there's just not a lot of support for these, so they kind of suck out of the box. So that's what we're going to fix. We're going to, we're going to care about non-humans. We're going to ramp into big non-humans, and we're going to try to draw lots of cards. So there's like an actual strategy and synergy with this deck, which I feel is a little bit lacking at the moment. So let's just get right into it. First off, we're going to take out 2 Oko's Accomplice for 2 more Fairy Vandals. Oko's Accomplice is just plain terrible. I pretty much never want a 3-mana 2/3 flyer in any deck ever. I mean, maybe if you're drafting or whatever, then it's fine, but 3-mana 2/3 flyer, not what I want in a constructed deck ever. And we need more Fairy Vandals because that seems to be what the deck wants us to do. So let's take out these Accomplices. Let's get 2 more Vandals in. The trade seems fine. The Vandal is a little bit smaller for sure, but it only takes 1+1/+1 counters for these to be the same size and for 1 less mana. And hopefully we'll be generating a whole lot more than just a single counter with it. So yeah, I think it's an improvement. Next, we're going to take out the 2-Unveil Tree Folk and replace it with Keeper of Fables. Is it 2-Unveil, Twin-Veil? I don't know. Doesn't matter. I don't need to know how it's pronounced because I'm taking it out and I never need to pronounce it ever again. The Tree Folk just doesn't do anything remotely useful for this deck. The adventure puts a couple +1/+1 counters on a creature for 4 mana, which is, it's kind of a lot of mana for that kind of an effect. And then after that, it's just a 6 mana 6/5 with no abilities, so it's a little bit overpriced. So it's just a clunky card that doesn't offer any synergy, and it's just kind of, what's it doing really? So we're going to take it out and we're going to replace it with this Keeper of the Fables, which actually works with this deck. It's a little bit smaller, but it's also cheaper, and most importantly, it's going to give us a way to draw cards for the Fairy Vandal. This is a key piece in the strategy, so I think it's way more important than this weird clunky Tree Folk that doesn't do much. And next, we're going to take out one of the Garen Brigg Carvers for our 4th copy of Keeper of Fables. Once again, the human doesn't make any sense in this deck at all. The adventure is pretty unimpressive, and the creature is a 4-mana 3/2 with no abilities, so this is just a mediocre card on all counts. Plus it's a human, which we don't want in this deck, so it doesn't make any sense to have it in here. The Keeper, once again, is an important part of our strategy, and I'm okay with taking out a 4-drop for a 5-drop because on the previous screen we did take out a 6-drop for a 5-drop, so that I think that kind of balances it out, right? I think so. Pretty sure that's how it works. Right, definitely. So yeah, we just want more Keeper of Fables. Happy to make this trade. Makes a lot more sense. So now that we have our full playsets of Fairy Vandal and Keeper of Fables, it's time to power up the non-human theme in this deck. First off, we're going to take out 2 Mistford River Turtles and replace them with 2 Sphinx of Foresight. So the turtles are alright when we have Keeper of Fables, and when I say they're alright, I mean they're basically completely terrible, but they're basically completely terrible in a kind of alright sort of way. Does that make sense? Not really. But when we don't have Keeper of Fables, they're even worse. You know, it's a 4 mana creature, has 1 power, and it does make one of our other creatures, you know, difficult to block by making it unblockable. But the Sphinx, you know, it has flying already, so it's already difficult to block. It's also a 4 mana 4/4 flyer, which is great. It also costs the same amount, albeit with 2 blue mana instead of 1. And we get to scry every turn, and we can scry at the beginning of the game. So it just has all this cool stuff going for it, and it works just as well with Keeper of Fables, because if we have that in play, then we have a 4/4 flyer that's swinging for 4 damage and also drawing a card, which is kind of great. And it gets to scry, so it kind of has some control over the cards it draws, sort of. I mean, technically you scry before you draw for turn, but you know, whatever. It's really good. It's a really good card. Makes a lot of sense in this deck. It's a solid evasive threat that will help us draw cards with Keeper of Fables, which will in turn put counters on Fairy Vandal. And then next we're going to take out the 2 Garen Brig Carvers for 2 more Sphinx of Foresight. I don't have much more to say about the Carvers. They're just bad. They're just as bad as the last time I talked about them. I don't want a 4 mana 3/2, and you know, the pump ability is okay, but it's not like I'm not super excited about it. And for 4 mana, I'd much rather have a 4/4 flyer that's going to let me scry every turn and can potentially help me set up a, you know, like a nice sequence of draws in the beginning of the game if I have it in my opening hand. So yeah, we lose the adventure, big deal. I want a 4/4 flyer that's going to help me draw cards and, you know, just potentially win the game, because it's a 4/4 flyer for 4. The Sphinx is an obvious upgrade in my opinion. Next we're going to take out the 3 Tome Raiders for 3 Spectral Sailors. So the Tome Raiders are terrible. Like I mentioned earlier, they're even worse than Cloud Conceers, which didn't make the cut in a previous Planeswalker deck video. Why would you pay 3 mana for a 1/1 flyer that can draw a card when you can get a 2/1 flyer that can also draw a card for the same cost? But I would still rather have the Sailors, just because first off we get the same body on a 1-drop instead of a 3-drop. It can also come in with Flash, which isn't bad, and most importantly, even though we don't draw a card when it enters the battlefield, we can pay for and draw a card, so it's a little bit worse if you get a turn 2 Fairy Vandal into a turn 3 Tome Raider. Then I guess in that scenario it's good, but you're still just attacking for a 2/3 flyer on turn 3, which is, you know, it's good. It's not like mind-blowing, but it's okay. And technically in that exact scenario, Spectral Sailor is a little bit worse, but on the other hand, being able to activate it and draw means we can continuously activate it every single turn in the late game and put a counter on Fairy Vandal every single turn. So it's kind of redundancy for Keeper of Fables, because Keeper of Fables gives us a way to draw an extra card every single turn, and Spectral Sailors can also do that as a backup, so we have a continuous way to draw cards for Fairy Vandal. And if we don't have Fairy Vandal, then, you know, it's still an evasive threat that can draw cards from Keeper of Fables. So yeah, it's just a nice little bridge that makes both of those cards better, instead of the Tome Raider, which kind of does that too, but just in a worse way. You know, it does it for a single turn, whereas Spectral Sailor gives us an engine to draw cards continuously over multiple turns. Alright, next I want to get some more ramp into this deck by removing 3 Bramblefort Finks for 3 Paradise Druids. So the Fink can be absolutely massive. You can pay 8 to make it a 10/10 if Oko is in play, but that's not very reliable. First off, 8 mana is a whole lot, and even if we do reach the point where we can actually activate it, there's no guarantee that we'll have Oko in play. And then, even if we do have 8 mana and Oko in play, it doesn't have trample or anything, so it can just be chump blocked forever. So it doesn't work until really late in the game. Then it doesn't always work if we don't have Oko, and then even if it does work, it can be negated pretty easily by the opponent. So I think the danger with this card is kind of a trap, is to see this alongside the turtle and think, well, if I have Oko, 8 mana and the turtle in play, then it's unblockable. And yes, that is possible, but it's very, very unlikely for that to happen. And then ultimately it's 10 unblockable damage, which is, it's a lot, but it's very unlikely to get to that point. And, you know, it's just, I don't think that's enough of a payoff to play just a whole bunch of bad cards. Yes, if you get that exact combination, it's great, but in every other game, it's going to be terrible and janky, and you're going to lose because you're playing with bad cards. So I'd much rather just have more ramp, because say a turn 2 Paradise Druid could go into a turn 3 Sphinx, and that could go to a turn 4 Keeper of Fables, which is just a lot more powerful and much more consistent and likely to happen. I mean, every time we draw a Paradise Druid, we're going to play bigger threats faster every single time, and that's better. I'd rather have turn 2 Paradise Druid into turn 3 Sphinx into turn 4 Keeper, as opposed to playing a terrible turtle and a Fink that doesn't do anything most of the time, so that once every 20 games, maybe I get a 10/10 unblockable creature. It's fun and janky, but I don't think it's, a winning strategy. I'd just rather have Paradise Druids. I want to ramp. I want to get into these big things faster, and I just want to beat down at a quicker pace and, be able to draw more cards and all that stuff too. So yeah, it just seems a whole lot better to me. Next, we're going to take out 2 more of the Oko's accomplices for 2 ops. This might seem weird, but here's the thing. We have a ton of ways to make Keeper of Fables work. We have a ton of little flyers in this deck now that can get damage in to draw cards, but we don't have enough ways to draw cards for Fairy Vandal when we don't have the Keeper. So I just want ways to draw cards, and this is perfect because, it's 1 mana draw a card. It doesn't hurt. It basically means we're playing with like a 56 card deck, and we also get the Scry, so we have the chance to get counters on Fairy Vandal, but it doesn't really affect the deck too much because we're going to draw into another card anyway. 1 mana Scry draw is the type of thing that will make this deck more consistent because we just have a little bit more control over what we're drawing, especially when combined with Spectral Sailor and Sphinx of Foresight. So we have just lots of ways to just draw cards, manipulate the top of our deck while beating down with flyers, and just the Oko's Accomplice doesn't do a whole lot. It's useless if we don't have Keeper of Fables, and I think Opt is just a much better choice here. Even if it is 1 less creature and a creature focused deck, I think it's still pretty good. And finally, we're going to take out 1 forest for a 3rd Opt. As always, this deck has 25 lands, which is just too many. 24 means we won't be at such a high risk of flooding, and Opt is a fine replacement since if we do find ourselves short on lands, it can help us find more, and it gives us another draw outlet for Fairy Vandal, so it'll work fine. And that is actually it, guys. That is all of our upgrades. If you want to spend a little bit more money on this deck, there's actually a really good one that we couldn't come close to affording, and that's Hydroid Crassus. Oh man, this basically does everything we want in this deck. It's an evasive non-human, so it can trigger Keeper of Fables, plus it draws cards when it enters the battlefield for Fairy Vandal, and it's an X-mana creature, so it can take advantage of all the ramp we're playing. It does everything. It does everything we want to do in this deck. The Crassus is kind of amazing, but unfortunately, at the time of this recording, they're sitting at like $25 to $30 each. That's each for each individual one, and you would probably want 2 or 3 of them at the least. So yeah, it's a great card, but it's very expensive. A single copy costs more than you will spend for this deck plus all of my upgrades, and that's just for a single copy. So yeah, it's expensive. Too bad, but it would be pretty good in this deck. Beast Whisper is also something I was looking at. It's a non-human that gives us another draw outlet if we play a creature, which makes it super easy to trigger Fairy Vandal, and these are only a couple dollars each, so they're not too expensive. The only reason I'm hesitant to add them is that every time I play a deck with Beast Whisper, I always find that the card is just too slow. I don't know why, but the number of times the card draw has mattered feels far less than the number of times I've lost games because I fell behind from playing Beast Whisper. It always feels like I'm playing catch up when I play Beast Whisper. Spending turn 4, which is a critical point where, big creatures are starting to come down, and playing a 2/3, it is really good because you start drawing cards, but you're also playing behind at that point. And I don't know, I never feel like I can catch up when I play Beast Whisper. Maybe I'm just too biased. Maybe I'm too jaded. I've been hurt before, but I don't know. It's okay. It's something to consider, I guess. You could also improve the mana base with Breeding Pool. Dual lands are great, and shock lands are definitely the best dual lands in Standard at the moment, but naturally these are very expensive. You can also improve the gain lands in the deck by replacing them with Temples of Mystery. If you're going to play a land that comes into play tapped, I think scrying is better than gaining a single point of life. If you do want to add some of these more expensive cards, I think the worst cards in the deck at the moment are probably Beanstalk Giant and Oko's Hospitality. The Beanstalk Giant is okay since it can ramp us, but I'm pretty sure I'd rather have Hydroid Crassus, so yeah, if you have one of those, Hydroid Crassus is probably better than Beanstalk Giant. Anyway, that's the deck. We definitely have a lot more power packed into this thing. We've really amplified those flimsy little sub-themes, so every card we play now should be relevant. There were just too many cards in this that didn't really quite fit, but I think we have really fleshed out the strategies. We've got a lot of power in this thing now, and I'm not saying you're going to go to a GP and win with this thing, but it's definitely significantly more powerful than what we started with, and we did it for very cheap. This deck is much better positioned to win than when we started before we spent a whole $5 on it. So yeah, not bad. So anyway, if you like this video and you want to see more like it, I have an entire playlist dedicated to upgrading Planeswalker decks, and you can find a link to it in the description below. I also upgrade Planeswalker decks as they're released, so feel free to subscribe for more of those in the future. Usually takes a couple weeks after the set is released, but you know, we get there eventually. And I will also be doing gameplay videos of this deck in the future. I do have a lot to do right now. I am doing post-rotation updates for the Challenger decks, so I'm hoping to get to gameplay videos after those. But yeah, if you want to see this deck in action, it will be coming. It is in the pipeline. It'll be happening eventually. But yeah, in the meantime, thanks for watching, everyone. I hope this video was helpful, and I will see you in the next one.